Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in the month of January 2020. In the month of January, I read 5 books for a total of 1,560 pages with an average star rating of approximately 3.16. 3 of these books I read in my own time for fun, and they were all thrillers. I also had 2 short books that I had to read for class this month, and I'm not going to talk about those as much, but let's get right into this month's wrap-up. So the first book that I read in the new decade I got from my library, and that was Night Film by Marisha Pessl, which I ended up giving 3 stars. I don't remember this book super clearly because it has been a month now almost since I finished it, so I'm a little hazy on some of the specific details, but I will tell you what I remember about it. Night Film's main character is a disgraced reporter named Scott McGrath. Now, in the past, Scott had become obsessed with finding out the truth about Stanislaus Cordova, a cult horror film director who now is a recluse from society, and his movies are screened secretly for his most die-hard fans in Night Films. When Scott finds out that Cordova's 24-year-old daughter Ashley is dead of an apparent suicide, it just doesn't sit right with him that Ashley actually killed herself, and he decides that he is going to find out the truth of what actually happened, and along the way he picks up some unlikely accomplices in his search for the truth about Ashley and the Cordova family. I thought this book had a really interesting premise, and it really made me want to check it out. I think that the way Marisha Pessl created Cordova and this entire detailed backstory of him and his films was really well done. He felt like he could be a real film director. She had all of his past movies, and she had the plots for each of them, and she would mention specific things that he liked to do in his films. Another thing that Marisha Pessl did was that she incorporated multimedia elements. You could actually download an app on your phone which would help you interact with pictures in the book in special ways. They would have photographs, they would have articles about Cordova or people who had been in Cordova's movies. They had screenshots from a website dedicated to die-hard Cordova fans. It really added this element of authenticity to this book, and it felt like Cordova could be a real film director. His backstory was so detailed, and Marisha Pessl clearly thought about him and his world a lot. I think my problems with this book were that it came off to me as somewhat pretentious, and also the main character, Scott, I really did not like him at all. Now, you don't necessarily have to like a main character in a book to enjoy it, but clearly I don't think Marisha Pessl wanted us to dislike Scott, and I hope I'm not offending anyone when I say this. I was really surprised that Scott was a character written by a woman because he was the kind of male lead that I expect male authors to write. He was casually sexist. Scott has an ex-wife and he makes sexist statements about women because of his past failed marriage. He's also not a great father to his young daughter. He's well-meaning, but not super attentive to her. And he's also a little bit racist. There were characters of different races that the main characters would encounter as they were following this trail of clues to find out about Ashley. And all of the characters of color were really presented as stereotypes of their respective races, which I really did not like. There was also a part of the book where Scott was transphobic because the characters ended up at some kind of underground nightclub where some of the employees are, it's not made clear whether they are transgender individuals or simply drag queens, but Scott makes a comment about them that was transphobic. And so there were these really troubling little things that he would say which really just bothered me. This is a very minor spoiler for the book here. It's not going to spoil the mystery or anything, but I'll put spoiler on the screen while I'm talking about it. There is this other female character who becomes one of the main characters of the book. She's helping Scott find out about Ashley. She's a young actress. I forget exactly how old it said she was. She was in her late teens, early 20s. Scott was, I think, 43. And this young woman develops romantic feelings for him, which I totally saw coming, and I was praying. I was like, please God, do not let her confess her love for Scott. And then she did, and she kissed him, and it was just, oh, it was so uncomfortable. It just seems like something a man would write, in like the way that there's this bland, somewhat offensive main male character who's supposed to be a good guy and is getting this 19-year-old young girl to fall in love with him. It just, oh, it bothered me so much. And though Night Film is supposed to be a thriller, there aren't a lot of concrete answers. The author introduces some elements of the occult and the supernatural, which I don't really like in thrillers. And then, without spoiling anything, I'll say that at the end of the book, I think that you sort of have to choose what you personally believe really happened, which really just, it wasn't the kind of satisfying ending that I was looking for. There was no aha, this all makes sense moment, at least not for me. Also, this book is 600 pages, and it did not need to be 600 pages. It was much longer than it needed to be. Up next in January 2020, I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, a very hyped book. It just won Best Thriller of 2019 in the Goodreads Choice Awards. However, for me, it wasn't quite worth the hype. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It was not a terrible book by any means, but it just did not meet the high expectations that were set for it, because everyone talked about how great this book was, how mind-blowing it was, how there was a great twist that blew their mind. What I actually got was really underwhelming after hearing so many people rave about it. Our main character, Theo, is a psychologist, and he transfers to a new facility because he wants to solve the case of Alicia Berenson. Alicia was a pretty famous artist with a husband, Gabriel, who she seemingly loved very much. However, one night she shot and killed her husband, and she has not spoken a single word since. Theo is determined. He is going to get Alicia to finally speak, a really interesting concept. I think the problem with this was there was really nothing in here that shocked me. I guess I could see how people wouldn't see the reveal coming, but when it happened, I was kind of just like, oh, that's it. All right. I also think that even though this is a mystery, it's not a really thrilling book. I don't think of it as particularly fast-paced. It wasn't something that had me turning the pages like other thrillers do, where I was just desperate to know what was going to happen next. I wouldn't say that I disliked the book. I really gave it 3 stars because I thought it was just fine. It was okay. I've read better thrillers and I've read worse. It was good. I definitely think that I would check out more of Alex Michaelides' work in the future. However, this one just could not meet my expectations. And maybe that's just because the book was so hyped that I really had high hopes, which was unfair, but I just think there was nothing about this book that was really exciting or new or different. I don't think the twist was mind-blowing. I could see how people might be surprised by it, but I also think you really can predict it if you pay close enough attention. And overall, I just think this was very average. I will say I did really like how The Silent Patient ended, where the author left us off on, and I do think that Alex Michaelides has a talent for writing, so if he comes out with more thrillers in the future, I would like to check his future work out, because I'm sure that the more books he writes, the better his writing is going to get. So even though this one was just meh for me, I think I definitely have the potential to love a book by this author in the future. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be very brief because I read both of these for school and I actually left both of them unrated, and I will explain why. The first of these 2 books I read for school I'm going to talk about, I read for my English class on Global Literature of Resistance, and that was Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, written by himself. I think it's really hard to talk about this book. This is Frederick Douglass's story of his life as a slave and how he taught himself to read and write and eventually escaped slavery. And when this was published, it really helped change opinions about slavery and encourage more people to support abolition. It was a really important work in that way. I think the reason why I don't want to rate it is because I don't want to rate somebody's life story, especially when it's something as difficult and personal as talking about what it's like to be an enslaved person. And it's also not a book that I'm going to say I enjoyed, because even though it's really well done and moving and emotional and tough to read, it's not something that's fun to read because it's talking about how someone was treated as property and not as a person, talking about the abuse they endured and that they watched other people endure. It's not something that you're going to read for fun in your free time. It's not an easy read. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable because it's talking about the unjustness of slavery. This is not an easy book to review because it is so deeply personal and is tied to such a dark period in American history. I definitely think it's important to read and to educate ourselves about this time. However, I really don't want to put a star rating on it because that just doesn't feel right with the kind of book that this is. To me, giving something 5 stars means, wow, this is going to be one of my favorite books ever. I had so much fun reading it. And while I didn't have fun reading this, I think it was important. I hope that makes sense. The next book that I read was actually a graphic novel. It was assigned reading for my historical methods class, which I'm taking as part of my history minor, and I didn't give a star rating to this for similar reasons. It was Maus Volume 1, My Father Bleeds History by Art Spiegelman. This is a graphic novel talking about the author's father and mother's experience in the Holocaust. And again, the Holocaust is something that's fun to read about. It's a really sad thing that this many Jewish people and other minority groups were persecuted and 6 million Jewish people died. It's not something that you're going to read about for funsies. However, it is a really important time to look back on because we need to remember these people and make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. I don't want to put a star rating on this because it is such a deeply personal story about a really dark time in history. Also, I just think that graphic novels aren't really my thing. This was the first one that I'd ever read because it's just never been something that jumped out to me before. So that's not my personal favorite type of book to read. However, I do think that it's an important story, and I just don't want to attach a star rating to a story like this that is tied to someone's darkest experiences in their life. Now, the last book that I read in January, I can talk about in depth because I just finished it last night, January 31st, before I went to bed, and that was Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. Another thriller. I got this through the Libby app. I love the Libby app. I'm getting books from it all the time. It is really awesome. And I wanted to read this book in particular because I read in the fall Peter Swanson's The Kind Worth Killing, which absolutely blew my mind. An amazing thriller. If you haven't read The Kind Worth Killing, I would definitely recommend it. This one, however, while it wasn't bad, I did not like it nearly as much, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Her Every Fear follows a young British woman named Kate who goes to Boston to apartment swap with her second cousin Corbin for 6 months. Now, Kate and Corbin have never met before, but Corbin needs an apartment in London because he's going there for work for a few months. So Kate decides that she's going to go to Boston and live in Corbin's apartment. Kate suffers from some severe anxiety, and when she arrives in Boston, she finds out that one of Corbin's neighbors, Audrey, has been brutally murdered. And Kate begins to wonder if Corbin was somehow connected to Audrey's murder. Another major character is Alan, another young man who lived in Corbin and Audrey's building. He also was connected to Audrey in some secret ways. I did still really like Peter Swanson's writing style in this book. I know I said earlier that The Silent Patient wasn't one that was a page turner for me, but this one was. I definitely wanted to keep reading it to see what was going to happen next. I think the problem I had with this is that Almost everything that happened in this book I saw coming before it happened. Peter Swanson would introduce something, I would say, oh, I think X is going to happen, then X would happen. There was no moment in this book where I went, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened, whereas when I read The Kind Worth Killing, the plot twist in that it just blew my mind. I was so shocked by that book that I had to put it down for a second and talk to my roommate about it because I was so shocked. This book didn't have a moment like that for me. There really were no likable characters in this book except for Kate, but that's not necessarily a problem. In The Kind Worth Killing, I really wasn't rooting for anybody. I didn't find any of the main characters likable or someone I wanted to root for, but I still loved that book. I think the problem here was that this book was not shocking, and I didn't care about most of the characters, and also I think Peter Swanson wanted me to care about some of the characters, but I didn't. There are certain characters who he wanted me to think of as a good person, but I didn't, and I couldn't root for them because I was just so disgusted by them. Also, just didn't like the ending to this book at all. Not only was there no shocking plot twist, I think that the resolution for the characters just sucked really badly, and I'm going to go into spoiler territory right here. So I'm gonna put spoiler on the screen, and if you haven't read this book and you want to, just mute this for a couple seconds and then come back to us. Okay, go. So there is a romance between Kate and Alan in this book, but Alan was not someone that I could root for because we find out that Alan was spying on Audrey Marshall through her window and that he developed this stalkerish obsession with Audrey, fantasized about them having a relationship. Kate ends up sleeping with Alan, regrets it in the morning, and then the book ends with her deciding to start a relationship with Alan, who has said that he's in love with her, even though I think in the book timeline they probably only knew each other for a week, maybe less than that. Give or take a couple days, it was a week. And I just don't think that was a happy ending for Kate's character. I think personally, I would have liked to see Kate now have confidence about herself in the world to know that she can do it and she is a survivor. I don't think her going to Alan to begin a relationship was a happy ending because I just couldn't shake the feeling that Alan was a creepy guy. I mean, he was spying on a woman through her window for months, and I'm supposed to be happy that that's the guy that Kate ends up with? I was not. I'm a fan of romance in books, but this just didn't do it for me at all. It was not good. It was not good. Spoilers over. One thing I was going to say before I went into spoilers, but I forgot, was that there was a sprinkle of romance in this book, which I did not root for at all. I wish that it hadn't been there. Also, I do want to say about this book that there are mentions of female murder victims being mutilated in a certain way, and that's something that I definitely think is very graphic, and I know that people who like thrillers have different tolerances for gruesome things like that, especially against women, so I just wanted to let anyone considering reading this book know that that is in there, and it comes up a couple times. So that is it for my January 2020 wrap-up. Overall, I think all of the books I read were just okay. There were none that I really hated, but also none that really wowed me in any way, but that's okay. We have so many more months of 2020 left, and there are so many other books I'm excited to read that I think I really do have the potential to love. Let me know if you read any of the books I read this month, and if so, what did you think of them? Please give this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every single Wednesday. My social media links are in the description if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have an extraordinary rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you in the next one.